Hi guys, welcome to my channel Lush Foliage. I hope you guys are fine and are safe. So guys, today I'm going to show you a DIY fertilizer that can be obtained from your aquarium. Now we all know that aquarium water is very beneficial for plants, and you all know that every week 20 to 25% of the water in your aquarium has to be changed in order to keep your fish healthy. So rather than throwing that 20 to 25% of water, you can use that water for your plants, and your plants are definitely going to love it because there is a lot of nutrients in aquarium water. Now guys, over here we are not going to be using aquarium water. That is a different fertilizer that you can use, but over here I'm going to be showing you a fertilizer that can be obtained from your aquarium filter. So this is my aquarium filter. Once when you open it, the sponge inside that contains all the fish waste. Now guys, fish waste is very nutrient for plants, especially for your flowering and foliage plants. But guys, please do not use this fertilizer for herbs, vegetables, or if you're growing anything that is edible, please do not use that fertilizer for those plants. You can use this for your flowering plants, for rose plants, or even for your foliage plants, but please do not use this on edible plants. Now guys, over here I always tend to do a 3 week of filter cleaning, and this is where all of my fish waste gets collected. Now what you have to do is just basically squeeze out all the waste, try to filter it, and try to collect as much as the solid matter, which is basically the waste from the aquarium, mainly the fish waste. Now guys, fish waste contains a lot of nutrients, including a high amount of nitrogen, which can be very beneficial for foliage plants as well as for flowering plants. But guys, remember a very important thing: whenever you're using any animal waste, be it cow dung, goat manure, or chicken poop, or even for that matter fish waste, it has to be dried in the sun. Never use fresh and raw. Animal waste can contain high amount of ammonia and high amount of salt, which can be harmful for your plants. Apart from that, it can also contain a lot of harmful microorganisms that can also harm your plants. So it's always better to dry it out in the sun, probably for 3 or 4 days or even for a week. Let it dry completely before using it for your plants. Now guys, when I'm talking about drying it out in the sun, all of the animal waste has to be dried out in the sun, even for that matter cow dung, because it contains a lot of high amount of ammonia, which can be dangerous for your plants. So guys, now I am done with cleaning of my filter, and I have collected all of the fish waste in that filter of mine, in the strainer of mine. And now next what I'm going to do is I'm going to put out the fish waste in the sun to dry, which will take around 4 to 5 days, or even at times, because right now it's the monsoon season, so it takes around a week or so for it to get completely dry. Now I was not able to collect a lot of fish waste because I had recently cleaned my aquarium filter, so there hasn't been much of fish waste. Otherwise, usually this small little container that you're seeing usually tends to get completely filled, but it's nevertheless, you will be able to understand what the process is, because this is more than enough to understand what exactly is going to be next. So now that I've completely filled and I've taken out all of the fish waste in this small little container, I'm going to put this container out in the sun to dry. Now definitely right now the volume looks little bit more, but once it tends to dry and get dehydrated, now the volume of the fish waste that you're seeing right now will be reduced to almost 1/4 after it gets dried and dehydrated. But it definitely works out. Now I know the amount is not too much, but at the same time you're getting these fertilizers for free without even paying any money. Now guys, these all ideas came up to my mind when I was in lockdown, and a lot of my plants were getting deprived of nutrients because obviously we were not able to purchase any of the plant nutrients out in the market. That's when I also started with my compost tea, which I started using for my plants, and I did see a lot of difference. Also at the same time I started using my aquarium water. I started making this fish waste fertilizer as well, and I definitely started seeing very good results on my plants. I could see there was a lot of new growth. I will show you in the later part of the video. My plants were doing quite well. There was a lot of new growth. Even my flowering plants were also doing quite well. So I realized over the period of time there is so much of things that is already available with us, which we usually tend to throw it away, but we can put in a little bit more of efforts and use them in our garden. So it's been a couple of days since I put the fish waste out in the sun to dry. It's almost complete, and while I'm going to be making this video, also this is my stray cat Rani that is having a lunch, so I hope I won't be disturbing her much while making this video. So guys, this is how the fish waste looks like after almost a week or so. You can see the volume of the fish waste has reduced, and now I'm just going to break them into smaller pieces because we do not want to use a lot of it, because these are small planters that we have. We do not need to use too much of it, because as you know, I always tend to use my compost tea, so this is going to be an additional treat for my plants. Now definitely I'm not going to be putting in too much because it already has compost tea nutrients, otherwise they will get over fertilized. Now guys, I have made them into smaller pieces and I'm just going to put smaller chunks into the pot. Now over here, the pot that I have now, this is my sunflower seedlings. This is the miniature sunflower seedlings. The seeds were purchased from Trust Basket and I had planted the seeds probably 2 or 3 months back, and you can see with the help of this fish waste that I have been using, very small amount, you can see how well they have been growing. Now another important thing guys, whenever you're using any kind of solid fertilizers like an additional thing, always ensure that the soil is slightly moist. Never put fertilizers directly to dry soil. It can harm the plants, it can burn the plants. So always ensure that there is a slight moisture, or you have recently watered your plant before you add any kind of additional solid fertilizers. Now guys, once I have dug the fish fertilizer into the soil, the next thing what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly go ahead and add in a little bit of more water. Now as I said, the soil is already quite moist. I do not need to add too much of water, but I'm just going to use very little water so that the fertilizer tends to get mixed with the soil. Now it will just take like maybe 4 or 5 days, and that fish waste chunk will not be visible in the soil. It will immediately get dissolved in the soil, or it might get completely dispersed in the soil, and that's how this tends to work. So I'll show you the pictures of the seeds when I had initially put them into the pot. Only one had germinated and I thought probably the others are not germinating, but then very soon they started to grow quite well. Now guys, remember fish waste is very high in nitrogen, so you do not want to add too much, because if you're going to add too much of nitrogen, then it will burn the roots and the plants. So be very careful whenever you're using anything that has very high amount of nitrogen. Now guys, these are some of my more of my foliage plants which I also tend to not regularly, but once a month or maybe once in 2 months, I add these small little fish chunks into the soil, and you can see how well they've been doing. They have been growing quite well. They have a very good green foliage color. Most of them are very healthy, and this is how I tend to use different types of fertilizers, mostly like onion peel fertilizer or onion skin fertilizer, sorry. And I also tend to use compost tea, and along with that I also very occasionally I also tend to use this fish waste chunks as well. And you can see pretty much everyone's doing quite well. So in this way I tend to use, some of the plants need a little bit more of feeding, so accordingly I put in the fish waste chunks. Some of them I give very little, some of them I give more, depending upon how much of compost tea I have provided them with, because at times you do not get enough compost tea, and I have a lot of plants, so it becomes little difficult to get a lot of compost tea. Even after diluting it in water, at times you really run out of the compost tea, so this kind of acts like a substitute. So for the time being, basically the plants don't starve, they are constantly getting fed with some nutrients or the other, which is always available without even paying any money. So guys, this is how all of my foliage plants tend to look like. You can see my philodendron Brazil, I also tend to give it a little bit of fish waste fertilizer. In fact, all of my plants tend to get maybe once a month or once in 2 months, they often tend to get a little bit of these fish waste fertilizers. So these are basically most of my foliage plants that often tend to get pampered, and you can see they're doing quite well. All of the leaves are quite green, and the ones that are variegated are also doing quite well. I do not use a lot of fertilizers on the variegated plants, otherwise they will start to revert back. Now guys, I still have some more of my fish waste fertilizer. Now what I'm going to do next is I have a lot of my hungry coleus plants that require feeding, so I will probably end up using all of these remaining for these plants, because this particular pot has around I think around 20 to 25 of coleus plants, which I occasionally keep trimming and propagating. So I'm going to end up using a lot of my, or the final slot of my fish waste fertilizer for these plants, because they tend to grow quite a lot, because I keep cutting them down and they keep growing, and there is a lot of them in this. So I'm going to use it completely on my coleus plants. Also, I think Rani is done with her lunch. It's her afternoon nap time, so I think she's getting disturbed while I'm walking around. So she has advised me to stop the video so that she can take a nap. So guys, that's it. This is all what I wanted to share about the fish waste fertilizer. So guys, I hope that this video was helpful to you. If it was, please hit the like button. If you're new to my channel, please consider subscribing to it. Until then, take care, stay safe, and keep planting.